Okay, let's take a look. Now, for these questions, yeah, the graphs are hand drawn, so may not be very pretty. Now, as I said at the beginning, you should really label the missing x values and y values before you attempt to do anything on the right hand side. If not, the chance of you tripping up and getting the wrong answer is very high. So how should we know? How do we know what to label on the x-axis? Should we label 1, 2, 3, 4? Or should we label something else? How do we know? So this is now when I first look at this graph, I was like, wait, hold on, this is -2, this is 1. So what?
That's the midpoint. You're able to do the math from there. So if it's 1 to -2 to get to the second to one of the midpoints from the highest point, you just subtract. So it'd be 30.
Okay, yeah. So the distance right here is 3. So the logic is that well, this is a quarter of the graph. So if a quarter of the graph is 3, well, the other quarter of the graph would be another 3. So we should put the x value 4. So if I go another quarter, I should label the next x value 7 and the next x value 10. And because of these x values, now you can tell the period being 12. What's the amplitude? 7. Phase shift? Left? 2. Vertical shift? None. Vertical shift is like moving up and down, not the amplitude. Okay, vertical shift is the moving up and down. So you look at the midline. Is the midline, where's the midline right here? 0 and the x-axis. That's a very good question. Can we do a cosine equation right here? Yes. Yes. Okay, so let's do the sine function first, and then we'll investigate the cosine option. So we should have all the values that we need. So if we do a cosine or sine function, so we have 7 sine, and then what's the b value? Pi over 6. And how do we get pi over 6? 2 pi over the period, right? The period is 12, so therefore b is equal to pi over 6. And then it's going to be x plus 2 because it's a horizontal shift to the left by 2 units. So that would be the equation for a sine function. Okay. Now, if you say, can I do it for the, can I write it as a cosine function? Right? Yes. Now the period and the amplitude will remain the same. That's not going to change. So you can look at this as a cosine function that's shifted to the right 1 unit. So the cosine function will be y equals to 7 cosine. You still have pi over 6 as your b value. But for the parentheses, you have x minus 1 instead. Okay? You have x minus 1 instead. Because you're thinking about cosine. Cosine starts from the very top. Yes? Not for tomorrow, but like for us, we will show you the whole graph, and the signal will be very clear. If you start from the middle, or if you start from the midline, that will be a clear signal that, hey, which one is more convenient? Sine. If it starts at the very top, cosine. So for question number 2, we'll say, well, what kind of function should we write here? Cosine will be a good choice. Now, let's label the missing values on the x-axis and the y-axis. So on the y-axis, this should be negative. Well, what's the midline? That's the midline, right? So the amplitude is 4 pi. So therefore, the y value right here should be -5 pi. Go down 4 pi units. All right. And what are the missing x values? Well, if this is 6 over here and 18 over there, the midpoint must be. So the last point must be 24. So what is the period? '24, right? So from here to here, it's 24. Period's 24. Any phase shift? Nope. Any vertical shift? Down pi. So therefore, y is equal to 4 pi cosine of, what's the b value? Pi over 12. Very good. X, well, x by itself, there's no horizontal shift, so let's not write too many parentheses, and then minus pi. All right, something like this. Okay, that's your equation. Look at the midline. That's how you get the vertical shift. The midline, it's always a good way to tell the vertical shift. Okay. So I was saying it to the last class period, I was like, if you tell yourself, if you can travel back in time and tell yourself back in August, you are going to write something like this in December, you'd be like, no way, this is nuts, this is crazy, this is confusing, what's this? If you tell this to yourself back in Algebra 2, you're going to write this next year. You'd be like, crazy. But you are writing it, and you know what's going on with these equations. All right, now go ahead, fill out the missing points right there. What's the missing y value down below? -2. What about the x values? What's the missing x value to the right of 2? How do you know it's 9? Yeah, between -5 and 2, that's 7. So a quarter of the graph, it's 7. So another quarter of the graph, another 7. So 2 plus 7, it's 9. So the last point on the x-axis would be 16. The leftmost unlabeled x value must be -12. So what's the period? From here to here, what's the period? 28. Okay, 12 over here, 16 on the right, 12 plus 16, 28. Amplitude is 8. Shifted to the what function are we going to use? Sine or cosine? Sine. So it would be shifting to the left by 12 units. Now, if you say shifted to the right 2 units, then you will have to do negative sign. Okay, but if you just keep it positive, then we just say, all right, the whole sine function shifted to the left 12 units. Vertical shift, up 6. What's the b value? Pi over 14. So the equation is y equals to 8 sine of pi over 14 x plus 12, and then plus 6. Okay. Make sure you know how you put all these values right at each point as they are supposed to. Number 4, what are the missing values? So we have 8 and 24 labeled. So the point in between 8 and 24 must be 16. And 8, 16, 24, so the next point must be 32, and then 40. So what's the period? The period, it's not 40. It's tempting to say 40, but the period, it's not 40. What's the period? It's 32 because you measure from the peak to the peak. Okay, so do not get tempted to say the rightmost number. Oh, hold on. I just got tempted. It's 32. All right, it's 32. Period 32. Amplitude is 20. Phase, are we using sine function or cosine function? Cosine. So we look at the top. So the phase shift shifted to the right by 8 units. Vertical shift, none. Okay, so the midline is still on the x-axis. So the equation is y equals to, on the cosine, the b value is pi over 16 parentheses x minus 8. Done. Ooh, what is the missing y value here? That's, how'd you get that number? -5, how'd you get that number? Yep. So so you can say, well, what's the total distance from -35 to 25? Well, that's a total distance of 60. So that means the midline must be 30 units away, 30 units away from the top and from the bottom. So that means the missing point of the midline must be 30 units above the lowest point. So that's how we know it's -5. Amplitude is 30. What's the period? Ooh, let's label the x-axis. So we got 3, we got 10, and the next one must be, and the next one must be 24, and then 31. So it is 28. 28. Sine function or cosine function? Sine would be lovely. So that means we have a phase shift to the right of 3 units. Vertical shift down 5. So equation is y equals to 30. And then sine theta, sine. And then b value is pi over 14. X minus 3 minus 5. Such a piece of art with the long equation. When you do your calculus next year, you are going to write something more lengthier, much lengthier than this. All right, so go ahead, look at number 6 on the back page. Let's take a look. Oh, by the way, before you look at number 6, just a quick reminder. Questions 7 through 15, it's not going to be on the quiz, but will be on a test next week, since it's progressive. Again, 7 through 15 is just for your practice for the test. They are not on the quiz tomorrow. Okay. What is not on this page but will be on the quiz tomorrow? Something like you know, sine of 15 degrees is equal to what? Cosine of 75. Because sine of 15 is the same thing as cosine of 90 minus 15. 90 degrees minus 15 degrees, which is cosine of 75 degrees, right? And what is cosine of let me write down what did I write down earlier? Cosine of 7 pi over 18. Cosine of 7 pi over 18 is the same thing as sine of what? Cosine of 7 pi over 18 is the same as sine of pi over 2 minus 7 pi over 18, which is sine of 2 pi over 18, which is the same thing as sine of pi over 9. Okay? So keep that in mind. So that's not on the worksheet, but it's on the test, on the quiz tomorrow. Yes? Yeah. But if it's in degrees, you use degrees. If it's in radians, you use radians. All right, so go ahead. Let's look at number 6. All right, go ahead and fill out the amplitude, period, and all the important info. What's the amplitude? 2. What's the period? 4 pi. Excellent. What's the phase shift? To the left, pi over 4 units. Vertical shift, down 1. What's the range? So original range, it's from -1 to 1, and then there's a 2 in front of it. So -2 to 2, down 1 unit. -3 to 1. -3 to 1. -3 to 1. So where should our first point be? So, well, our initial point should be right here. But then we have to multiply by 2. Oh, hold on. We move to the left by pi over 4 times 2, and then move down 1. So we'll settle our first point right here. Negative pi over 4, comma 1. That's the first point. Where's our next point? Now, so this is how I'm going to describe it. Okay, my way, like this. Yeah, in between, or like what I would say, it's 1 squared to the left of 4 pi. Even less math. 1 squared to the left of 4 pi, which is 4 pi units away from the first point. Got the second point. So this is a cosine function. So these 2 points are the highest points. That means right in the middle, we should expect to see the lowest point. The lowest points, right between these 2 highest points, in the middle of these 2 highest points, we should see the lowest point. So the lowest point, which is at -3, for the y value, should appear at x equals to so 1 square to the left of 2 pi. We should see the point right down there. And again, everything should be symmetrical. If you count the squares, okay, everything should be symmetrical, left and right. And then 4 squares away, it should hit the midline. Right, so that's these are the points. All right, so these are the points, and this is the graph for the first wave. And they've got to finish up the rest. So let me use a gray color for the rest. So we know that every 4 squares, you got a major point. So 4 squares to the left, it hits midpoint. It hits midpoint again, midline again, and then 4 square more to the left, it hits the bottom. So I would grab it, and on to the right. There's still 1 square to the right that you need to, fill it out. That's good. Okay, just make sure you take that into account. Do not stop short. Make sure you graph filled up the entire graphing area. Do you think you can do this tomorrow? Yes? All right, now, the answer key is uploaded. So when you go home over the weekend, or if you have time tonight, I would strongly suggest you to start practicing these guys, making sure that you can recall these values and recall these values fast and accurate. Okay, make sure you do that. Now, I just want to pick a couple questions to work on for number 13. How would you do number 13? Yeah. Yeah, what's the y value that's equal to -1/2? Or you can also think about sine of an angle is negative. So what quadrants would it be? Quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. And then we say, what's the reference angle? That would give you 1/2, the ratio of 1/2. What's the reference angle? Pi over 6, right? So there are a couple ways you can do it. You can do it with the reference angle way. You figure out the quadrants, you figure out the reference angle. So you'd be like, oh, quadrant 3. So that means it must be 7 pi over 6. And quadrant 4, it must be 11 pi over 6. Or you can just use your knowledge of reference angle. I mean unit circle. You're like, oh, what's the y value of -1/2? They will be in the quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Just obtain these two angles. Then you got the two answers too. Again? Now, it's in radians, so I don't really care about the degrees. But it will be 210 and 330, if it's in degrees. Okay?